Welcome everyone to Genetic Alliance's webinar series on Registries for All, Registries and Biobanks. Today's webinar is on disease advocacy organizations, and I'll say in a moment what we'll cover. We welcome everybody to the webinar. You'll note that you're muted for this webinar. That's because we have so many people registered and want to be sure that we can hear from everyone who does have a question. And so how we do that is there is a question box in your control panel on the side there. And at any time during the webinar, feel free to ask a question. If possible, I will look both at the presentation as well as the questions and try to answer them as we go. But certainly, if not, I'm going to leave enough time so that we can do those at the end as well. I invite you all to take notes as we go. This webinar will be recorded and posted, so you can look at both the slides separately as well as listen to the webinar again. We do record the audio, all the questions, that sort of thing. So we're very much interested in all of you giving us feedback as we go. So to begin, as you all know, Genetic Alliance is dedicated to giving the advocacy community and beyond into the research and clinical communities as many tools as we can to make drug development, diagnostic development, interventions of various sorts go as quickly as possible and really be accelerated in their development. Each of these tools that we develop are essentially crowdsourced in the sense that they're created by the community in response to the community, and so we're very eager always to have them be iterated on. We're also very interested in them being interoperative, and we have been so since we created Genetic Alliance Registry and Biobank in 2003, the first cross-disease registry and certainly the first lay-owned registry system. This webinar is the third or fourth in a series, and so what we assume in this webinar is that you've had the chance to either be part of the other webinars or to look back and review some of the recorded ones. So I am not going to go into the kind of minutia detail that we did on the other webinars. Instead, I'm going to be specifically looking at disease advocacy organizations and what is best for you, what might work, that sort of thing. So again, if you have more general questions, I recommend you look back at the webinars that have been pre-recorded. And for the advocacy groups on the phone on the webinar, we did recommend that you make sure your listing and disease info search is up to date so you know what we're talking about as I go into that section. And so I'm going to assume that everybody has done that or at least begun to update it. Okay, so to begin the webinar, I want to talk about how we see Reg4ALL extending disease advocacy organizations' reach. So some disease advocacy organizations have beat the bushes and can't find any more members. I think what we're seeing is that members used to be 20 years ago, and I should stop for a second and say, for those who don't know me, and I think most do, the reason I came to this is I have two children with a genetic disease, and I founded a disease advocacy organization in 1994. Founded the first lay-owned biobank in 95, and went on to do a lot of basic research leading up to a clinical trial finally this year, 17 years later. So I've been in the trenches, learned from my peers, am one of the disease advocacy organizations that I'm talking about. And so when I say we beat the bushes and can't find more members, I think a lot of us in our early years did really terrific outreach work, and we continue to do that. But there's so much noise for people in the world today to be found, to be sought after, to be desired, to be part of things, that it's hard to get people to find us and also to sign up with us. I think, again, in 1994, 98, 2002, if a child was diagnosed with ectodermal dysplasia or Prader-Willi or PXE, the disease my kids have, then parents signed up. They sent in their money and they waited for their newsletter either online or in the mail. And now I think what parents do and what adults do who have diseases, they go to many, many places and get lots of information from many sources and don't necessarily sign up. So membership is a little different than it used to be, and there's a lot of competing entities looking for that membership, including, for example, Facebook groups made by people, created by people with a condition. So I think that starts to become an issue for disease advocacy organizations having the reach they formerly wanted to have. And then second bullet, some are so new that they don't have robust membership yet. So, we help disease groups establish themselves every single week. So there's new ones every week. And then some are expanding their work to related syndromes, and so they'd like to figure out how do they get to those related syndromes, affected individuals quickly. And then some need less expensive recruitment methods. So again, in the old days, we had to mail stuff out, in our case, to specialists in ophthalmology, dermatology, gastroenterology, and that's expensive to do those mailings. And so we know that we need now to have more speedier ways of interacting. Individuals and families are now joining many organizations to meet their needs. They might join one about the condition. They might join another about the educational issues for the child or the adult, accommodation issues. They might join others that are for caregivers, et cetera. Individuals are just catching waves here and there on the internet and not really joining. They need multiple ways of interacting and staying engaged, where a newsletter from us used to work in 1996. It doesn't work as much anymore. People are used to multimedia, interactive stuff. People expect gamification and feedback, instant gratification, rewards for their participation. An old flat screen with a bunch of buttons to click doesn't seem to work as well as it did earlier in the internet page. And then people want to see how they compare with one another, and I find it really interesting that they want people, all of us, want to be like others, and we also want to be extraordinary, both. And so the idea of giving people feedback can do both of those things. So I think that is a really critical piece. And then people expect the system to be personal and responsive to who they are. And this increases as we all get used to the internet. We're very much interested in things being tailored to us. We want to see it, whatever it is, being very responsive to who we are, what we think, how we feel, that sort of thing. And if it's a very general experience, then we're not as interested. Affected individuals are usually not affected by one condition or state of health. So in the past, we were happy just siloing people into one thing or another. And now comorbidities, systems biology, all sorts of other things, pathway studies are really calling on us to look farther than the one condition. The consumer movement is penetrating health, and people are expecting to control their information. Every single article that we see on the internet now, and start paying attention to this, that talks about big data, large databases, aggregating information across systems like universities or countries. Every article talks about granular privacy preferences, setting sharing preferences, giving people control of how they share their information. And what we will see, especially as we move into things like the regulations that are coming out of the HITECH Act, and as we look at meaningful use 1, 2, and 3, is that there will be a call for us as a society and globally to figure out how do we let individuals share their information. And we could go into a long conversation on that, which I won't, but basically to say people have different sort of set points about where they want to share information and where they don't, and with whom and how and what information. All of that is up for grabs, and it's highly, highly individual. So to say one blanket consent with one checkbox for all research is not going to work. And to say that no one should share anything is not going to work. So we really need to find ways to do this, and we believe Reg4ALL goes in that direction. Okay, so what do we disease advocacy organizations fear? And this could be considered controversial, but I'm going to just take a lot of the fears that we hear or that I've felt as I've gone through this sort of evolution from 1994 to now, and certainly before for some of the older groups. So we fear that cross-disease platform registries will decrease our donor base. There is for us a kind of correlation between how many people we have as members and registered and our donor base. And one of the things that I think we can do is decouple those two things so that we don't have to worry about that. But I'll talk more about allaying all of these fears as we go. We also believe that if we don't control all the data on our disease, we won't be able to call the shots. One of the things that I've been particularly satisfied with our foundation is that because we've controlled all the data, we have 900 fields of data on 4,000 people that we've collected for 17 years, that every researcher comes to us and they make sure that they follow our guidelines for data sharing and for resource sharing and all the other things that we want to do so that we're minimizing the duplication in the community. When we looked at moving into a larger system like this one, we worried about not being able to call the shots, and I'll talk about that again a little later. We worry that others won't do it right, so we do it ourselves. over and over, that's true of us. We say, well, I'm a little different. And one of the things that's very funny to me when I reflect on myself and my organization is, and I'm sure those of you who run disease groups know this, when you have a meeting, a support group meeting, every person says, but you don't understand, my disease is different than everyone else's disease. This is this desire to be unique. And you don't get that I experience this disease differently. And we who run the disease groups know that that's true and it's not true, that there are some commonalities. And I think the same thing is true about our disease organization. We each say, oh, no, you don't understand. For me, it's hard to raise money, or for me, it's hard to get XYZ done. And actually, all of us are in similar boats. Certainly, there are differences, and the differences are important, but we should also be looking at what's right, what's easy, what's common. We also believe to some degree that common platform registries won't meet our very special needs, therefore, or that they'll be too expensive, or that we won't have adequate time, staff, and resources and expertise, or this is just all too confusing. So what we try to do is build this system with all of these fears in mind. So I think the world demands some things if we're going to make a difference sooner than later. I like the thought exercise, the thought experiment of saying, if we all sat down now and tried to decide what will we do as a community to allay disease across the world, would we build siloed organizations with separate boards of directors and duplicative accounting systems and directors and officers insurance that we each have to buy and all of that? Would we do something different? And my first bullet, risking as much as our member families do. I think every day the people who live with the diseases, and that includes some of us, risk a lot. And so I think as organizations we have to risk a lot and figure out where would we put that risk in order to make better solutions, better benefits for the people that we love and serve. I think that the world is demanding collaboration, cooperation, and networks, including cross-disease research. I think we could get away with 20 years ago not doing so much together or not doing things collaboratively. But I think in a world of commons and open access and all sorts of things emerging in pathway biology, we're going to have to work together, and we want to figure out how to do that. There's huge connectivity. We know that now. I mean, imagine trying to build your organization 20 years ago and today. It's just light years different. Again, the pathways and systems biology approaches. Fast-tracking all of the aspects of the solution at the same time. No longer are things done in a linear, one step at a time, get this step done, and then go to the next step. Things are networked, so we have to be working on a lot of things at the same time. Teams of teams, so there's lots of ways to say that. We really need to be working in collaborative groups in order to make differences happen, including even for specific diseases. Not constraining innovation by the industries of old. So if you haven't read Larry Lessig's The Future of Ideas, or there's a great online webinar of his from the Sage BioNetworks conference last year, I think it was, just go to Fora TV and Google him. The idea that we have constrained innovation a lot by looking at how we did things in the past. And I think what we want to do is say, what does the future look like? And let's do that now, the good stuff, and not wait to be outmoded, outdated, and essentially punted to the side before we do the new thing. Getting people to stick to our DAO, stickiness. So how do we get people to be interested in our disease advocacy organization and stick around and be part of it? And then we should be what we are asking others to be. So if we're asking others to be collaborative, to be networked, to be for each other, then the first and foremost, every day I need to get up and say, how is it true that I am working for others or am being collaborative, that sort of thing. So into some of the nitty-gritty. Let's view registries from all from the individual's perspective. So this is the affected individual who's coming to Registries for All. We believe that we want to empower individuals to join us in building registries. And right now, I'm not specifically talking about, although I could be, any one subset of one of your disease organizations. I'm talking about anybody. Because again, we're not going to be able to just catch people through the single portal of your website or the single portal of our the Facebook page on that condition. We really want to empower the public, and that everybody in another webinar I say is a needle in the haystack. And the haystack's made out of needles, therefore, so we don't have to be worried about who are we catching and how do we get to that one individual. So we believe that We want to engage people. We want to educate people. We want to bring them to this point on the highway, this information highway of trusting and deciding themselves, do they want a red, a green, or an orange light to go onto the highway. And then in our system, we look at a gamified survey, some common data elements, and then some disease-specific data elements. And again, we go into more detail about what all that means in the other webinars that we've done. So the average individual then comes in through any number of ways, and I'm just showing you one way, one place that Registries for All is present, and that's the platform Disease Info Search at diseaseinfosearch.org. So because this has so many links in and out, it has high SEO and is building. The URL itself is only about 3 or 4 months old, so we moved it from Genetic Alliance's website to its own entity. In this database are 15,000 diseases, and then information, and again, I'm not going to go into Disease Info Search, but information on the disease advocacy organizations that serve that condition, as well as lots of quality resources that are filtered with special algorithms to give the general public a snapshot of the information they can get on this disease. On this page, which people come to if they Google, a disease like epidermolysis bullosa, they Google it, they come here, there is an opportunity to join Registries for All. You can see it right there on the front page. Or an individual can come in through a disease advocacy organization website. And here I'm showing you the Transverse Myelitis Association because they, in fact, have implemented part of this program, not the whole thing. But the brand is theirs. There's no Reg for All. There's no brand at all of something else. We see Reg for All like a widget or an app. It really can go anywhere it needs to, and we're having some fabulous conversations with major universities and with pharmaceutical companies where it could be deployed. It doesn't have to look like Reg for All. We don't even care if it looks like Reg for All. But in any case, either way, a person can get in. So here's the disease info search page for Prader-Willi syndrome. You can see all the sorts of things you could jump to topics for, advocacy organizations, health questions, symptoms, diagnosis. So most of this is pulled in either from the disease advocacy group themselves entering it in or from filtered queries that we send out to respected entities across the net, like the NCBI, National Library of Medicine. And then this pop-up on the side, so you saw here, if I press this little pop-up window on the side, it asks you some questions. And so this is another way to enter the survey. The idea is to get people to be comfortable with entering into the survey, into the questionnaires without a lot of friction, without making it hard, without making it more than 1 or 2 clicks, that sort of thing. So if we look at this whole system, and you can see I have Reg for All up here or your brand, and of course we don't use this highway analogy with the public, but essentially we're trying to figure out how do we get the public on in a way that's a trustworthy way, but then get them onto the highway where they feel comfortable and they can stay in the slow lane, they can move to the middle lane, or they can get to the fast lane if they wish. So if they did click that, I want to answer some questions. One of the things they're presented with is an opportunity to set their privacy settings, to decide how much they want to share, who they want to share with, and how they want their data used. And what you're looking at here is a page, privacy settings for me. It says it right here. You're viewing privacy settings for Sharon. This is a video of a trusted entity. So in this instance, I answered liver cancer. I said I have liver cancer, which I don't, but I'm just demoing here. And who I get is Donna Cryer, who is the former CEO of the American Liver Foundation. And she's a guide. She's going to tell me in a video, which I'm not going to play now, what she thinks about privacy concerns. And right here, she's probably describing to me that she's fine with everyone discovering her data, which means it's de-identified, aggregated data. She actually could say she's not fine with that, which is very, very unique about this system. Almost every system says, okay, so if it's de-identified data, that's fine. I'm fine with sharing it. We're saying we're not even assuming that you're fine sharing de-identified data. But in this case, she allowed it. She also allowed, in this case, disease advocacy organizations serving her condition that are listed in disease info search to contact her. So essentially she said whatever liver foundations are listed in disease info search can contact her. She's allowed her contact information to be shared with them. And then nonprofit organizations serving her condition, well, that gets out there. That could be, a special, special nutrient, a nonprofit. I'm making this up. And so she's saying, ask me. Don't just send my contact information to them. And then use my data. She's actually saying, ask me in both of these cases. So she has moderate privacy concerns. Someone with lower privacy concerns might say, allow, 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 allow. I suspect people who don't have stigmatizing conditions, who have lethal conditions for which they may succumb soon, for just some of the younger people, although some recent studies have shown that while young people share information freely, when you do ask them very specific things like, would you share information about your bipolar disorder, they say no. And then settings for people with greater privacy concerns. And these are fairly granular. We can have your organization name listed right here. We can have your partner researchers listed here under medical researchers. So there could be, you know, Dr. Paul Smith from Johns Hopkins University listed right here. And you, as the guide on the prior screen, would be saying, we're doing a study with Dr. Paul Smith at Johns Hopkins, and we really want you to, we encourage you to share your information with him, and then the person may want to click allow, allow, allow all across here. Also, this screen comes up the way that you've answered one question before it, which is how you feel about sharing data. If you've said, I feel like I like my data to be very private, then this comes up, the default is all ask me or no. And if it says, if you say I'm pretty comfortable sharing my data, then it comes up with a mix that is a more liberal, but not quite a liberal interpretation of that. And in the final section here, we have data analysis platform, compare with others feature, which we'll show you in a second, show related content feature, the Genetic Alliance Translational Research Network, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, the Oracle Health Sciences Network, and then some newly released data analysis platforms. These will be the big data platforms that will come out, and all of these are clickable with these little eyes in order to give the individual information about them. Again, you're the guide on the screen before, and you might want to talk about which things you think are important to share in and which things you would not consider sharing, or where you would be cautious. So again, let's start with this first lane, the gamified survey, and let's look at that. In this interactive survey, what we do is simply ask people questions that we believe give them instant feedback, like I talked about before, and that start to give us a sense of what kinds of things should be asked to the person. So this is actually somewhat predicated on what a person answers in order to get the next question. And again, I'm looking at this from the individual's point of view, and I'll talk in a few minutes about what happens on the disease advocacy side. But essentially, what we see here, and I'm in a hotel in Utah getting ready for our meeting here on big data and family history. So, okay, so I'm on the screen, Reg4ALL, so I'm a person. I'm just coming to, as this is a person, and I have the opportunity, if I want, to answer some of these questions without signing in. So I can say, I currently exercise X amount of time. And it gives me some feedback on that, so I can see I'm a little under average there. More average people are 1 to 2 times a week. I see my primary care physician yearly. Okay, that's pretty much average, and so on. So I can play with this, and we believe people do play with it. We've seen people stay here for about 11 minutes because they're interested in seeing how they stack up against others. But I'm going to show you how I sign in because that's been recommended to me. And I'm signing into this demo account, so I'm not messing up our data. And the color of my first car, you set up my account for me and told me it was gray. And the street I lived on, remarkably, is the same one that Genetic Alliance office is on. And I'm going to sign in. And I have a little demo bunny, which I'm sure Susan set up because I have bunnies now. And my password. So you can see this is very much like signing up for the bank. You get this picture, you get questions that ask you about your life, some security questions that you put in. If I had said remember my computer, it wouldn't have done that except for the bunny picture. It's very much like signing into the bank. Okay, so here we are on my signed in picture, and there's a number of things I could do. I could look at my account, which is things like, you know, my password and my security questions, that sort of thing. I can look at my health profile, which includes questions I've already answered, and eventually will include my electronic medical record, that sort of thing. I can look at my privacy settings, and I click that button. This will take a minute because this hotel wireless is really here's my privacy settings. So similar to the screen you saw before, some things have been changed. I could edit the settings if I want to. I'm not going to do that right now. If I go back home, I can continue my health questionnaire. So I've been working on that, let's say. So you can see people can go away and come back, that sort of thing. And I am going to say again that I have liver cancer. And if I click that and add it to my list of conditions, I'm going to say that I'm done. I could add all sorts of things. And then it starts to ask me some questions. Do I have trouble breathing? Do I have yellowing of my skin and the whites of my eyes sometimes? Hepatitis B is caused by blah, blah, blah. Have I ever had that? And you can see so on, you know, have I been diagnosed with liver failure? And so it's asking me a whole host of questions that I'll talk about in a second about how we got to these questions, but essentially allowing me to make decisions that see how I stack up against other people in the system and also where I am. So I can look at things like my progress and say, okay, I've answered 10 questions. You can see on the, all kinds of different categories, different tags. I'm only a little ways in many of them because I've only answered 10 questions. I get badges for answering the questions, which keeps some people engaged, some people don't care. And then I can also look at my answers and see if in fact I have answers to the questions that I've looked at and how many are unusual and how many are typical by the colors there. Okay, so if I now look at this whole thing from the point of view of the disease organization's perspective, I'm back to disease info search, remember that page. And this page again has, and it says here 13,000, I need to update this, we're at 15,000 diseases and their subtypes. These match the diseases used by the Genetic Testing Registry, OMIM, Genetic GARD, the Genetic and Rare Disease Information Center run by the Office of Rare Disease Research. The information in this system is being used by pharma and biotech to choose diseases to work on because there's so much rich information in one place and because of an algorithm tool that we're building that I'll talk about in a second. So here's the Backend Dashboard. So here it says, welcome PXE International, because that's the disease advocacy group that I logged in with. And this is my dashboard. I want to say this is a beta dashboard that you won't see right now if you log into Disease Info Search because we're in the process of implementing it. Right now you do see this. So you see here all the stuff that you can fill in, address and contact information, educational materials, services and support, research information, and resources. There's also a portal for you to go into to create questions, and we'll show you this in a second. And there's a third portal that we're working on and will be hopefully up and running by the end of the summer called GaugeRx. And if I click this button, then what it does is it pulls in information, especially from this research information tab, that starts to crank the probability of success for a drug company or the ability of my organization to actually progress down the pathway toward drug development. So in other words, if I didn't have a registry or a biobank or a cohort, it would say, ding, there's a real need here and a place you can work on it. If, for example, I had all those, but I didn't have any assay, it would say, here's a great place for you to work, and it would give you resources to work on assay development. And again, using lots and lots of tools that have been built by the federal government, by other governments, et cetera. If I didn't have a validated biomarker, it would say, ding, there's no validated biomarker, so this is less than desirable disease to work on at this point. And so, again, pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, and even government agencies have been asking us to build this tool based on the richness of the information in this database, and it will start to spit out a kind of snapshot of where a disease group is. But we're going to focus today on Reg4ALL. By the end of the year, we'll have a webinar on GaugeRx. So, Susan, I'm going to pass the controls over to you, and you can take us on a little tour of how to create a questionnaire.
Okay. Show my screen. Hello, everyone. Hope you are doing well. I'm going to give you a little bit of a demo of how to create questions. Right now, we are logged in as Genetic Alliance. And I created a little bit of a small survey on breast cancer questions to give you a demo of what everything looks like. So I have created these questions in the past. I have been diagnosed with breast cancer. I've had a breast biopsy. And when someone who comes to Reg4ALL enters that they have breast cancer and answers yes to this question, then these questions will start to come up for them. So I'm going to add another question for you to give you a feel of what we can do in terms of questions, in terms of gamification, to make these questions very engaging. And you know, that's really what makes people stick and makes people answer these questions more and more. So,
and I'll point out that what Susan is demoing is what you would see through the portal that I showed you from Disease Info Search, and you will be the one who will be creating these questions. We do offer technical help, and that comes in the package with a membership in Genetic Alliance Registry and Biobank to be part of this system. But you can do this on your own as well with no technical help, and you'll see how easy it is. Go ahead, Susan. Thanks.
No problem. Exactly. So this is the kind of thing that you guys will be doing if you decide to create a survey. So you can choose multiple choice questions, some of the spectrum questions that you saw, and you can see there's a bunch of different choices. I'm just going to go for a multiple choice. I have the option to make an introduction. At this point, I'm not going to do that because I've done that for the other questions. And I'm going to make a question, add genetic testing. I'm going to make a question about the BRCA mutation. Where is the BRCA gene? Because I think that will be a nice next step for the survey. There are some, I can add any type of response I want, but they give me some options that are pretty common. So I'm just going to do a nice simple yes, no. It's done. I can add some other options to press the histograms if I don't want them to come up, but in this case I do want to keep that gamification. Then I have the option to create requirements. So this is when the branching logic comes in a little bit more. So I don't want this question to be the first thing that that someone sees when they answer breast cancer questions. Maybe I want to wait and make a requirement of, do they have any relatives that have had breast cancer, and make that a requirement for the BRCA genes to come up. So I just, click immediately following, and there we go. When someone does the survey, as soon as they answer this question, if they answer, more than one, or answer one or two, then we'll ask the genetic testing question. Then we just click save, and that will bring us back to the survey. And so now I've added 5 questions to my survey, which will come up to anyone who answers yes to the breast cancer question. Sharon, is there anything else?
Great. No, I think that's a good preview. And again, we will be doing a webinar for disease advocacy organizations with everybody's mute off, because it'll be just people who are very serious about actually doing this, and we'll be giving a little more detail. Although you can see that there's a lot of possibility here, and that once you get into it, you'll be able to really go forward with making all sorts of branches, dependencies, if-thens, all those sorts of things, requirements, constraining data and information, that sort of stuff. So, so I am going to take the screen controls back, Susan.
Okay.
And back, great, thank you. Okay, so so where does the data go, one might ask? And so what Susan just showed you are what are called public questions. And those public questions, just make sure I'm showing my screen. Yeah, let's see. Okay, no, not. Okay, I get this. Okay, and those public questions, they, in fact, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm on. Okay, those public questions.
Sharon, you are not showing your screen. Okay, there you go.
Okay, yes, I am. So those public questions actually are ones that get put into a pending sort of holding tank, and then we, with our vendor, TraitWise, look at those questions and make sure, for example, that they're not duplicative, or that, in fact, they should be answered in a more, asked in a more kind of constrained or typical or traditional way that has been validated. So that sort of work is done on the inside. There are two databases that the information go into. And the way that this works is that the secure information, so things like the HIPAA identifiers, go into a secure private access account. Private access is the vendor that we're using. They are the only ones that have this technology so far that allows individuals to set sharing and use preferences like you saw. It's a privacy bureau like PayPal is for our credit card and bank information. Because I think all of us at first say, well, why should I trust anybody with my information? And then we realize, hey, we've actually done this transition with banking. We've done it in finance. For example, if I set up a really cool shop tomorrow to sell my son's furniture that he's building, you're probably not terribly inclined to give me your credit card information to run. But if I set up a PayPal button on the website, you're fine with clicking the PayPal button because you've already validated yourself with PayPal. You know, PayPal builds its entire reputation on trust, and if it blows it, it blows it. So Private Access, the company that we've partnered with on this experience, is the secure bank account for the private information. So that information actually goes in a separate database. Genetic Alliance has no access to it, and neither does anyone else, including Private Access. They've had their own people try to hack their own database, and they can't. Then the second set of information, so the information about how many times do you wake up at night, and did you see the doctor yearly, de-identified data goes in a HIPAA-compliant database in the cloud, again, through a vendor to Genetic Alliance. That information can only be moved to either be searched, de-identified index, or used or have you contacted when the privacy preferences you set are matched with it. So the privacy preferences essentially are a key to letting that information in or out of use. I should also say that if let's say 50% of the people with your disease said, no, nobody can see me or discover me, then when you search that de-identified index, those people would not come up. So we, again, are giving people kind of an extra layer there. And one of the interesting things is even for Genetic Alliance, we cannot study who says no and who says yes because we have no access to who says no. So it's a very interesting kind of system. And then individuals determine who can discover them, who can contact them. They can join your disease advocacy organization, for example, and then who can use their data, download it, and do a study. Now, to download and do a study, it is required that the organization or entity or researcher, whoever, it is required that they have IRB approval. Genetic Alliance has its own IRB, so that IRB can be used, or any IRB, but it has to be an IRB-approved study. And then in order to see the reports and to search the data, that sort of stuff, there's another app called RecruitSource. I don't have time to demo that today, but essentially that's where individuals would have access to de-identified information, access to the contact information if the people had said, yes, you can contact me, full data download if the people had allowed that, each individual, and then all of the above are dependent on the privacy settings of individuals. So this would be the portal through which people will go, organizations, researchers, to access the data. So what other benefits do you get as part of this system if you're coming in as a nonprofit? And I have been saying disease advocacy organizations, but the Genetic Alliance Registry and Biobank is open to any nonprofit. So you become part of something called the Oracle Health Sciences Network. And I have in parentheses there MALL. That's a slang, and this is a slang interpretation of the MALL that we're part of. We'll be announcing this in the next couple of weeks. But basically, Genetic Alliance has joined the Oracle Health Sciences Network, which functions somewhat like a MALL. So here we are. We come in the MALL at the bottom there, and there's the MALL directory. This, by the way, is an example. The organizations named here are all part of the MALL except transverse myelitis. I just wanted to give us an idea of putting a disease advocacy group there. I could have put PXE International, whatever. So I come in and I search for people with Prader-Willi syndrome. And what I find is that there are 431 people here. 281 of them are new to me, and I want to invite them. So where are they? Well, the MALL directory tells me 150 are in Reg4ALL database, 65 are at Aurora, 300 are at MD Anderson, 4 are at University of Pittsburgh, 62 are in my association, and 0 are in the Transverse Myelitis Association, which makes sense, although it could have been some comorbidities and crossovers. So what it does for me is it opens a whole new world and allows me to see that, hey, there are people all over the place, and as I said before, people will be affiliating with one thing or another, not necessarily one thing, and I can actually look across all of these entities, and through this mall directory, contact all of them. Again, that's an example. And then if an entity in the mall, so let's take Aurora, that healthcare system, which is in Wisconsin, searches for Prader-Willi syndrome, it says, oh, look, these people, and again, I could, say 150 people in Reg4ALL and 4 at Pittsburgh and 62 over here, blah, blah, blah. I can invite all of these to be part of my study. And again, just an example. So that sort of ends the first part of my presentation, and the second part is much, much shorter because I want to leave some time for questions. But essentially, that's what you get if you're part of Registry in the Genetic Alliance Registry in Biobank. We do have a Registry Pro option, and we will be actually webinaring this much later in the summer because, again, we're trying to build each of these things as we go. But this is an a la carte registry option. It used to be that when you join the Genetic Alliance Registry in Biobank, you had to join both, and now we're actually splitting them. You can join one or the other or both. This Registry Pro system is based on something called REDCap, which was built by the CPSAs, which were built by federal dollars. And each year the CPSAs get somewhere like $500 million. REDCap was built at Vanderbilt. 647 institutions use it. 87,000 researchers use it as registry software. It's fully customizable. The fields are standards-based and can be automatically coded. There's a data dictionary behind it. It's capable of longitudinal data entry forms, and it has report building built in. That's only a tip of the iceberg. It's phenomenally responsive, productive, useful software. Again, so many people using it. Every day I get like 500 emails from individuals who are using it and tweaking it and making it better since it's still part of their system now. I don't read all 500. I get them in a digest. So this system will allow a much higher level of research. What we like to say is Registry allows you to start to build cohorts. It makes it so people are discoverable. It builds funnels for the things you want people to go to, whether that's your disease organization, a certain study, a specific institution. All of those things are done very well with Registry, with all the stuff I showed you up till now. Registry Pro allows the kinds of studies that we want to see done for epidemiological reasons, for adverse drug events, for natural history, for validating biomarkers, for actually conducting research, for doing studies. So this is the level you go to if you want to do studies. Our vision is that this will be a fully integrated system where you don't have to worry about, gee, I started with Registry, now I want to switch to Registry Pro. It would just be a continuum. Just like the people could go from the gamified lane into the common data elements, which are common across all diseases, into the disease-specific questions, you could go as an organization from this more light version in the Registry system to Registry Pro. And essentially the entire thing will have the privacy layer over the top of it. So again, those privacy preferences maintained by the Privacy Bureau, survey gamification powered by the company TraitWise, the standards and coding that are available through REDCap so that they are using standards like HL7 and ICD-9 and 10 and NOMED CT and et cetera, data dictionaries, all that stuff would be coming through the REDCap system. And then we'd be working people through teaser questions, common data elements, disease-specific questions, and then EMRs, lab images, reports, et cetera. Well, this integrated vision is funding dependent. I think most of you know we were able to get what we got so far because we won the Sanofi competition for the Innovate Challenge, and we have used that funding up till now, and now we're in search of other funding in order to do an integration of the two systems. So the two systems do exist. They are not connected yet, and one of our goals is to connect the two systems. If we put them side by side, we can see that individual use for both of them is easy. You saw the questionnaire system for Registry. Well, the one in Registry Pro looks like Surveymonkey. It's pretty easy. Administration's very easy in Registry. It's medium in Registry Pro. Again, next webinar, we'll be talking specifically about what we're going to offer disease advocacy groups around that. Standards-based Registry right now is not standards-based. It will be. Again, when we are able to integrate and do this continuum, right now Registry Pro is standards-based. Both have HIPAA-compliant servers. There's no data dictionary on Registry right now. There will be on Registry Pro. Audit trails exist on both. Gamified on Registry, not yet on Registry Pro. So again, Registry Pro will look more like Surveymonkey, and you won't get immediate results back. You will on the back end because you're the administrator, but not the individual. Automated export, yes, on both, although Registry Pro offers some more formats, ones like SPSS and SAS. Registry does not yet. Privacy layer, yes, on Registry, not yet on Registry Pro. Again, looking for that funding to do that integration. You cannot collect longitudinal data in Registry. So if you're saying my child is 20 pounds at age 2, I can't say at age 3, how did he compare to age 2, because my age 3 will overwrite the age 2 data. On Registry Pro, yes, you could do a snapshot every month if you wanted to, every year, certainly, whatever you wish. Comparisons to others, yes, in Registry. Again, not yet in Registry Pro, except on the back end in the actual data. And then coding in Registry. So coding means, you know, are all males 1s and all females 2s so that I'm interoperable with other systems. Registry, no, so far. Registry Pro, absolutely. And then just a commercial. We just learned this morning, this is timely, that out of 227 applications, Reg4ALL was picked as one of 6 of the transforming health system game-changing business models. They're using a voting system, which I despise, but in any case, you can vote for us. There are 5 other worthy organizations and their systems in there as well, from Kenya and Nigeria and all over the place. This is put on by Boehringer Ingelheim and Ashoka. I'm an Ashoka fellow, so we were able to apply for this. This would be a very, very small amount of money, but every bit gets us more toward that gamification. And then the last bit that I'll share with you is that we will be having additional Registry conversations here on June 13th at noon that will allow individuals to be unmuted and to have a conversation about what they want to know about what all this entails so that they could consider it for their organization. And this is for organizations that are considering these registries quite seriously. Okay, so I'm going to stop speaking. We have about 10 minutes left for questions. And I'm going to answer them in the order that they were asked, unless I can combine some of these on the fly. So I'll begin with a question. And I also invite Susan and Barbara at Genetic Alliance Office to jump in if any of these need further clarification. So the first question is, if the disease advocacy organization has an existing survey, can it be imported into Reg4ALL? Fabulous question. The answer into Registry is no, although you could retype the questions. You would have to invite the individuals to come in and answer those questions again. And again, you would lose the longitudinal nature of that system. For Registry Pro, the answer is yes. And so we are actually right now doing that. We're taking the diseases that have had registries in the current Genetic Alliance Registry system, and we're importing them into the new Registry Pro system. And that so far has gone along without any hiccups. We are delighted that the fields map very well. In any system, so if you've been doing your system in Excel, or if you've been doing your system in any other registry system, basically what we're going to be looking for is how easy is it to map the fields from one system to another. And as registry systems get more sophisticated, they're smarter about looking at how those fields can be interoperable using standards. And so that's why we're really happy Registry Pro is very standards-based and can accept any other registry system that has standards. But even if you don't have standards and don't have a data dictionary, that's the kind of thing that we can give you technical assistance for. Next question, does the does your own sort of record allow for open-ended journaling to document your own story? So this is a really nice piece of registry, and that is that every individual can create questions and answer them, and they can be open-ended. So what we have found, and those of us who run disease organizations know this, that the best and most amazing wisdom comes from the individuals with the disease and their lived experience. And very often their lived experience is very important to them because it holds clues both for their better health as well as better treatment and quality of life. So what I'm really excited about is that individuals will be able to put in their own questions, start to ask the community questions, and in fact be able to share those questions and answers with each other through the system. And yes, there will be a kind of journaling. Now, a more robust journaling would actually be done through another tool that Genetic Alliance is really excited about, and that's the Inspire community. And I just have scrolled my screen up to Thursday, August 8th at noon. We'll be talking about support communities on Inspire, and those are definitely conducive to more journaling and storytelling. And again, pending funding, our desire is to be able to move these kinds of tools together so that we're actually looking at the Inspire community stories connected to the data that's coming out of Registry and Registry Pro so that we're able to see the whole picture of the disease. In addition, the Inspire community is really important because that data can be semantically mined for information that might be important to put into the registry. So a really comprehensive system. And then another question, wondering if giving permission to be contacted would be spelled out. So essentially, when we're in the place where we're setting up those permissions, we're giving the individuals that we love and care about enough information to make those decisions. And some of that's done through the video, and some of it's done through screens and through pop-ups, that sort of thing. And what we want to make sure is that those individuals have given the right kind of permission. And the example here is they ask for contact for enrollment or marketing or to be in a list to talk to media, et cetera. There are a subset of private questions that we didn't show you in the trait-wise system. And in the trait-wise system, I could sign in and I could set up private questions. And I might say, I would like you who belong to the Progeria Research Foundation, for example, to answer these questions. Would you like to be contacted by the media? Would you like to be marketed to? Would you like to, so on? And those would be more private questions. How do you feel about the foundation? What things would you like to see to be improved? So it could be used for anything that you want to ask people about, and those would be private questions. In the public section, we're really only looking at privacy settings, essentially, that allow us to really deal with research issues and not so much marketing and media and that sort of thing. And the other thing I should say is no one is saying, if they say, yes, my information can go to the disease advocacy organization, or yes to all researchers, no one could use that information for marketing because that is not what someone is consenting for. And in fact, researcher is going to be tightly defined in the beginning. While we certainly want, as I always like to say, smart Girl Scouts to be looking at our data because they may come up with a solution, we also want to make sure that they're bona fide researchers and that they have the credentials they need. The next question is Registry and Registry Pro connected to Reg4ALL. Registry is so this is a little complicated because we haven't been able to connect these two things yet. Registry is Reg4ALL. Reg4ALL is Registry. Now, Reg4ALL is going to be used by the general public with nothing to do with any one of our diseases specifically or belonging to a registry that we've created. And so we have this sort of generic term, Reg4ALL. It's really a database tool, interactive system. It fuels Registry, which is the first level of coming into Genetic Alliance Registry and Biobank. Registry Pro is not yet connected to Reg4ALL, except that the database is in the same system. And so what we are looking to do is connect Registry and Registry Pro. I hope at least by the end of the year. If we get more funding before then, certainly we would be doing that before the end of the year. It's a major concern for us. And if I've come to the end of the questions, I'll give people another minute or two. We have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has another question. Okay, looks like no more questions. Okay, I will take the, yes?
There's some more questions in the chat box, actually.
Oh, okay, in the chat box. Let me look down there. Ah, okay. Let's see. Let me scroll up again. Okay. How does Reg4ALL compare to other free registry platforms? Reg4ALL, as far as I know, and of course I don't know everything, is the only registry system that gives individuals the right to choose how they want their information discovered, used, or how they want to be contacted. I don't know of another one that does that. And I also don't know other ones that integrate that with gamification, with instant gratification. Next question, how to compare with online questionnaire systems like Surveymonkey? Great question. So Surveymonkey is fabulous. The problem with it is it gets quite expensive to do this sort of work. It doesn't have a kind of medical bent. It's not a HIPAA compliant database. We, I think, are putting together a side-by-side of this and Surveymonkey so you can see the differences between them. It doesn't have sort of the intelligence that the trait-wise system has, which is when I answer liver disease, it comes up with lots of liver questions for me. When I answer something else, it comes up with something else. There are about 20,000 questions that are in the trait-wise system already that are pulled when an individual answers something. They could actually spend the next 10 days answering questions if they wanted to. Next question, how much does it cost to use Reg4ALL? We will be going over all the costs in the webinar that I described that's coming up on June 13th. So we'll be going into detail on the costs for Reg4ALL, both the Registries and the Registry Pro system, both of those. Can DAOs create more than one survey in Reg4ALL? Yes. You can put questions into the public section, tag them so that you can pull them out as a specific questionnaire for you, but not for the public, because the public, again, does not see things the way we see them. And so you can create more than one survey. If you're in Registry Pro, absolutely, you can create many, many surveys. They can be branching from each other. They can be dependent on each other, very sophisticated. And then another question is, Registry Pro a higher cost than Registry? Yes, the answer is yes. So what we're really looking at is how can we make this as affordable as possible, but absolutely sustainable. The last thing we want to do is start this and go out of business. Genetic Alliance is a nonprofit, but we still have to pay the lovely people who work with us, and we also have to pay our vendors. And so we're trying to figure out what's that price point. If those prices seem to go down all the time, so for people who have been part of Genetic Alliance Registry and Biobank, they will actually see a cost decrease by going to this better system than they had before. For people joining either one, again, we're going to go over all that sort of stuff on June 13th and look at the cost differences. Again, very affordable, and I think less than other registry systems except for free ones, of course. And there will be a tiered basis all the way from free to some amount of money per month. Again, it's quite doable. And probably the last question, in general, do existing researchers mind that Reg4ALL has their people, and do they have to give permission to be listed? That's a great question. So essentially, a researcher will not be listed unless when we go to that portal that the people, launched the wrong thing here, the people in you guys logging into Disease Info Search under research information will be listing your researchers, which you actually already do there for those of you who have updated, and those researchers will be listed. I suppose the disease advocacy organization should, in fact, the question, the way it's worded, is who do you have a relationship with and with whom are you working? So that is taken care of in that arrangement. The other way a researcher might be listed is if they have a IRB-approved protocol that's listed in clinicaltrials.gov. They will be listed in this as well if they wish to be. And the other thing I should point out is RecruitSource will have these individual researchers looking at this data and interacting with the system in a way that is very robust and allowing essentially clinical trials to come to the people who need them rather than the people looking for the clinical trial, and they will be very well matched therefore. That brings us to the end of our hour. I want to remind everybody that our next webinar is Thursday, which is different than Wednesday, so pay attention there, June 13th at noon, and that'll be for disease advocacy organizations. It says by invitation. That basically means we want you to tell us you want to come, and then we'll invite you. But we are looking for, at that one, people who are very serious about starting a registry so that we don't have a lot of people on the phone and then not be able to get to all the questions. And then following that, several more throughout the summer, as you can see here, researchers, individuals, companies, the support community of Inspire, and then what the future look like. We're very grateful for you all to attend today. Again, any and all contributions that anyone wants to make in terms of giving us more and more information would be very useful about what we could improve and what could be better. We're very excited to be working on this with you, with the community, and to finally bring, I hope, some solutions together that make sense. So thank you all very much for attending, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.